So welcome to the meeting that we're having tonight on the Basin at I-64 in Grinstead. My name is Angela Akridge. I'm the Infrastructure Planning and Environmental Compliance Director for MSD. We're going to be talking about the I-64 in Grinstead project. If you've been to a previous meeting with MSD, we're going to do this meeting a little bit differently. We're going to give a brief overview of the Project WIN program, which is the program to abate these sewer overflows across the community. We're going to use the little clickers that you were given when you came in to ask some questions about who is here and your interest in this particular project. And we're going to talk about the project in particular and give an update on where we are with design. And then we're going to be asking a series of questions about the particular project and your interest and how we enhance that project as we move forward. At the very end, we're going to have an opportunity for individuals, if you would like, to make a statement into the record. It will not be part of the Metro TV taping. However, we will record that and we'll use that to enter in a public comment officially. You'll also have the opportunity to submit written comments if you would like to do that. So as we start to talk about why we are here, we got to start with the amenity that we all enjoy by being part of this community, particularly in the area of I-64 in Grinstead, and that is the wealth of streams and water bodies that we have in this community and the quality of life that that affords us. So you may see in some of these photos activities that you enjoy or your kids or your grandkids enjoy that go on in these creeks that we have. What happens, though, when it rains is that we have sewers that will overflow. And out of those sewers comes all the debris that is down in there and is going to work its way out of those sewers, and it's going to be in the creeks, and it's going to jeopardize the public health and safety of all those that are using that waterway for recreation. When we look at where these locations occur, they are everywhere in Jefferson County. There's no one particular area that doesn't have this situation occur. And so when we talk about sewer overflows and controlling sewer overflows, we're really talking about a community-wide issue. We have site-specific projects to deal with each of those, but the toolbox that we're using is about the same. And so you see two different colored dots on that map. The blue dots towards the northern part of the city are actually what we call combined sewer overflows. Those go straight to either the Ohio River or to Beargrass Creek, and they're the older original sewers that were built in this community. They carry both stormwater and wastewater together. The other dots outside of that are the sewers that were built as separate sanitary sewers, and they have separate stormwater systems. So those are sanitary sewer overflows that behave the same way, they just are in a different part of the system. So when we look at the work that was done in this community to solve this problem of overflows and the public health impacts, it goes all the way back to the 80s when MSD, working with the state, removed hundreds of failing treatment plants that had been built by subdivisions as the community sprawled out from away from the city. So once those were removed and the thousands of septic tanks had been eliminated, then we still had these overflows that remained. And in working with EPA and the state of Kentucky, it was discussed that we needed to move this particular work forward, and we entered into agreement with them to clean up this part of the pollution that remained. And so that plan was submitted in 2008 per that agreement. It was approved in 2009, and it set out stipulations for when this work would be completed. And so the work that is on those combined sewers, those older sewers that are mainly within the Watersend Expressway, must be completed by the end of 2020, and that work on the separate sanitary sewer system must be completed by the end of 2024. The particular project that we're talking about falls in that group that's within 2020. So we have a toolbox of options that are available to us in terms of reducing these overflows around the surrounding creeks. And so they range from extending pipelines to building basins to diverting stormwater to doing green infrastructure. We've got lots of different options available, but each of those are site-specific to the area that we're going to be working in. And what you see here is actually the timeline of how we get to 2024 and the reductions in overflows that will occur. And you can see the specific groupings of projects that have been going on since we entered into that agreement. So we're actually in the section where we're designing those CSO basins, those overflow basins for those combined sewers that have to be finished and operational by the end of 2020. So what we're going to be doing this evening is actually presenting some early design concepts and getting your input onto how we can enhance those, what options might be more amenable to those that use this area that we're going to be talking about. It's a little bit different than we've done in the past, and so the little clickers that you have will be working with you to provide some input through those. And so at that point, I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Ted Grossart with the University of Kentucky, and he's going to be asking you some questions.
See, you could have left the UK part out, and I probably would have got along better. Hi, my name's Ted Grossart. I am at the University of Kentucky, but in my defense, I'm also teaching a class at the University of Louisville, so I'm partly, I'm partly reprieved. The MSD has asked us to come in and help them improve and give them a better way to get a more nuanced set of information from the people in the districts that are going to be involved with these projects. So the kind of work we're going to do involves sort of like having a giant focus group. We're going to ask questions of you. We'll record some of your answers, and then you'll use the keypads to give us some responses on some of the responses that you've given us. We'll start with some relatively simple things. I'm going to ask you, let's go to the next slide. So, first question is, how young are you? And of course, you have ample opportunity to fib here, but then I wouldn't know who is fibbing, so press the number that corresponds to what you would like your age to be, or you believe your age to be, or does everyone get a keypad on the way in? Okay, just make sure. Is everyone in that wants to be? Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, so you can see we've got preponderance of folks in the 50 to 70 age category. It's helpful for us to know that when we have, obviously if we have a larger group, it becomes more useful because we can compare who's in the meeting versus the population of the community. So we would like to know those kinds of things. Okay, next question is male or female? Okay. We're missing a person or two. Hit your buttons again if you choose to. Okay, I guess that's it. We'll see what we have. Okay, obviously we're interested in getting more people to come to the meeting, so one of the things we want to know is how you actually heard about the meeting. And since there are multiple ways that we were trying to inform people, you can tell us up to 3 of these options that were things that you were aware of that informed you about the meeting. Anything from 1 to 3. So just press the up to 3 that correspond to how you heard about the meeting. And I think I'm in someone's way no matter what I do here. So if you got a postcard and you saw it in the paper and you heard about it from somebody else, then you would press 1, 2, and 4. Up to 3 ways you heard about the meeting. These are radio frequency, by the way, so you don't have to point them. You can hold them behind your back if you don't want anybody to see what you're doing. But then you can't either, so it's a trade-off. Okay, let's see what we got. So the postcards and word of mouth. Many of the meetings we go to, word of mouth actually works pretty well. Okay, we need the map. What we're going to do here is we've made a little map of the region around the project site, and we've marked off the areas with numbers. And what we're going to ask you to do are questions about where you live, where you play, and if you have a business, where it might be. So Steve's going to talk to you.
Just to give you some reference, you may have difficulty seeing this map. The star is essentially where we have the Basin sited in behind the Jim Porter's restaurant. We have most of this is divided by major interstates. This line is I-64 corridor, so we're on the south side of the I-64 corridor. Bardstown Road coming down this way, Millwood Avenue on the northern side of the boundary, Brownsboro Road, and then Speed, I think, runs down this side. So is everybody able to distinguish those boundaries? Sorry? Here's Lexington Road, and Payne Street would be right here. I'm sorry, sir?
Number one, basically that's a half mile.
Yes, it's just a radius around that site, yes, sir.
So we're in 4 right now.
That's correct.
And, you know, use your best guess. This isn't, yeah, we're not slicing the bologna too thin here. Yes, the poll is open all this time, so. And if you're outside of that area, of the green area, then just punch in 0 or 10. And this is a question about where you live. Is that everyone? Okay. So we have a fair number of folks that are from outside the immediate area and a fair number that are from very close to it. So next question is, where do you spend your day? Right? One question is, where do you live? This is a question, where do you work? Where do you play? Where do you go to school? Where are you during the day? And if you're in multiple places, then you can enter up to 3 locations that you primarily spend your day using the same map. Is everybody comfortable? Okay, let's see what we have.
There's virtually no residents around here.
Oh, businesses, we contacted a lot of businesses.
Okay.
So again, one, and in this case, one is the most predominant place where people spend their day, and also people outside of that area. So this will all be available on the website when we get done. So you know, we don't have to slice and dice it too finely. Okay, one more question about location. If you're a business owner, is it in which of these areas is it in? 1 through 9 or outside of that? Looks like we have 6 business owners. Is everybody in? Okay. And again, about 2/5 of them are in Area 1, and about 1/5 are outside of the area. Okay, I think I have one more question for you, and I'll leave you alone for a while. Steve's going to talk about this project in more detail. So what we'd like to know going in is sort of how familiar do you feel with this? How much do you think you know about the I-64 Grinstead project? Do you feel very unfamiliar with this kind of new news to you? You know some things about it, or you feel like you're pretty much up to speed on it? 1, 2, or 3. Okay? Okay, so about 3/5 are really, this is kind of new to you, so that's good. I mean, that's a good thing to know. All right, so I'm going to hand this off to Steve. He's going to go to step 3 and give you an overview on the project.
So good evening. My name is Steve Emley. I'm the chief engineer at MSD. And as Angela mentioned, we started back in 2005 putting together the suite of projects that we call the IOEP or Project WIN, but really the suite of projects that deals with the combined sanitary sewer overflows in the county. The fact that a majority of people in the room are unfamiliar is bad news to the rest of you, because I'm going to go into a little more detail about some history that I might not have otherwise, but I think it's important. We're going to regurgitate this slide several times, and I'll just show you progressively how we've gone through certain phases of this project through the years. Again, beginning back in 2005 with our original consent decree, we started a public involvement process in 2006 and carried that through 2009 with a series of about 20 overall consent decree related meetings throughout the community, in addition to about 200 or more meetings with individual neighborhood associations and smaller groups to educate them about what was coming in terms of the work that we had to do in the future, the magnitude of that work, and what that was going to do to rates in the future. So again, that public involvement went through and continues today. The IOAP was actually approved in 2009 by EPA, so that was our blessing to proceed with work on these series of projects, although we had actually begun on some of them prior to that date. This is a map that represents what that original plan for the IOAP basin looked like for the I-64 and Grinstead project at the time. At the time, it was about a $2.75 million gallon basin that was originally sited to be in an open area just to the northwest of the Jim Porter's property and in between Jim Porter's and the Middle Fork of Beargrass Creek. So that's where we started in terms of a conceptual plan for this particular project. If you've been to any of these meetings before, you'll understand that these CSO basins are sited among numerous CSOs. So they're sited strategically so we can convey and store those flows from multiple CSOs instead of building a basin for each CSO. So we're collecting flows from 4 CSOs at this location. So we began the design phase at that time, and again, we had a roadmap of what we thought that was going to look like. Early in the process, because that site was originally selected at a pretty high level, we did do a more in-depth review of some of the adjacent properties that were near that site, but still concentric to those 4 CSOs that we're trying to control. So this is a display that shows you where those other locations that we considered early on were. And again, this is still when the basin was sized at about 2.75 million gallons. At the end of this exercise, we concluded that the original site selected in the original IOAP was the preferable site. That site that was just behind Jim Porter's restaurant, out of the floodplain, and between Jim Porter's and Beargrass Creek. So we moved into what we thought was going to be a preliminary design phase, and about the same time we went through a modeling revision in our consent decree. And one of the good things about our consent decree is that it gives us the flexibility. That flexibility is built into our consent decree to be able to modify our plan as we proceed through the plan. So we are able to make modifications to it as we find ways to make it more efficient, either from a overflow control standpoint or from a cost standpoint. What that modeling revision did to this particular basin was it took it from 2.75 million gallons to over 15 million gallons, which was a huge, huge swing. This was one of the basins that was impacted most by those modeling revisions. And we're happy to share the details of why that happens in some places and not others, but this is probably not the place for it. But 2 things happened in 2012. One thing that was substantial is that we had requested that the completion date of this project be pushed out to December of 2020 as opposed to the original date of 2014. So we essentially bought ourselves some time because of the size of it. We entered into a public involvement process that brought us out to a meeting at the Girl Scouts back in 2012. The feedback that we got from that meeting was twofold. One, we got lots of questions about why are you putting it here. We got lots of input about have you considered other sites, have you considered green infrastructure, have you considered other methods that could downsize this basin at this location. So just to give you a sense we did actually look at 2 other sites during that process as well. This is the original site in behind Jim Porter's. We looked at 2 of the sites, one being down at the River Metals property further west on Lexington Road, and also a site across Interstate 64, which we call a Quarry Street property. It was also down in the floodplain, but it was an available site that was close enough for at least us to consider that site. From a cost standpoint, neither one of those costs turned out to be near as effective as the proposed basin in behind the Jim Porter's. It also involved a lot more impacts to the environment in terms of constructing conveyance lines along Bear Ash Creek. So we came out to, again, Jim Porter's, the Girl Scouts in 2012, and presented some concepts about what we thought this site could look like. And this is another rendering that you'll see later in the presentation when we start to get some more feedback about what this site might look like. And on the heels of this meeting, again, we went back and we started to look at ways that we could alter what this basin might look like in terms of size. So when we start talking about green infrastructure, I think it's helpful to spend a minute talking about what green infrastructure means to us, because it means different things to different people. Green infrastructure to MSD is a means for us to either infiltrate stormwater into the ground or otherwise absorb stormwater. Because stormwater and sanitary sewage is our mission that we're tied to with these projects, we recognize that green infrastructure has a lot of other places in the community. And it's important to understand also that green infrastructure works very differently in different parts of Jefferson County and the city of Louisville. The western part of the city, if you say west of First Street, as you get into that area, we are into deep sands and alluvial gravels that drain very well, and they're very prone and great candidates for us to, instead of constructing large storage basins, to infiltrate stormwater into the ground. So instead of building storage, we take advantage of that storage that is in those soils. So we are doing that, and we have done that effectively through several demonstration projects, and we have actually eliminated one of these small CSO basins in the CSO 130, the Butchertown area. If you drive through that area, you'll notice a series of improvements through there that involve tree wells, some pervious pavers, and some other items that have essentially allowed us to eliminate a very small CSO basin. Again, we're able to do that there because of the type of soil that we can drain that stormwater to. We've got a similar approach that we're taking with a larger basin a little further to the west in Portland as well, again, because those soils are conducive to that type of work. When we move further east in the county, including the area of I-64 and Grinstead, we have a completely different geology, and we are not able to infiltrate that stormwater. So when you talk about ways that we can reduce the size of this basin, it really takes the infiltration pretty well off the table in terms of being a cost-effective way to do that. So we are looking at stormwater diversion, essentially areas where we are able to effectively separate the storm and sanitary waste, or downspout disconnects is another effective way that we can make incremental changes to that amount of flow. But again, that infiltration does not work in areas where you have heavy clays, where you have bedrock. So when you talk about when you hear us talk about infiltration working in some areas and not, I-64 and Grinstead area is generally not an area where infiltration is going to be one of the tools in our toolbox. Spend a little bit of time talking about why it is effective for us to do essentially stormwater separation in these areas. If you think about how the combined sewers were constructed, and then in the 50s, the construction of new combined sewers were outlawed. So as the city expanded to the west, these areas that we've got highlighted in pink, they essentially built separate storm sewers and sanitary sewers. So in those areas, there is a separate storm sewer and there is a separate sanitary sewer. But because the only outlet was already constructed as a combined sewer, those subdivisions and developments simply discharged both pipes into that single combined sewer. So they're separated within those areas, but they dump into a combined sewer. So these are some of the areas where we have effectively planned to peel off that stormwater from the combined sewer system and divert it into the natural drainage system of the county. By doing so, that has allowed us to take advantage of that reduction and has resulted in a decrease in the size of this basin as well. So there's another tool that I haven't talked about, and that is MSD about 2 years ago now, introduced a program where we incentivize developers to install green infrastructure. And essentially MSD fronts some of the construction dollars that allows them to install green infrastructure. In doing so, they also get a discount in their drainage. But there are two large areas in this watershed that is taking advantage of that and also contributes to this reduction. That is the Baptist Seminary and Sacred Heart campuses. So those are two other tools that are really helping us here. So again, those are kind of a summary of all of the projects, some public, some private, that have helped us reduce this basin from over 15 million gallons down to 8.5 million gallons, which is where we are today. So here we are entering what we call our final design phase, and it's important to recognize that we did successfully have the completion date of this project moved out to December of 2020. So we bought ourselves the time we needed to go through this review, to take a hard look at what those other alternatives were to the size and location of that basin. We have reduced the size of the basin. We have not eliminated the need for the basin. So we have to have this done by 2020, which seems like a long way away, but we have probably 2 years of design work to do and almost 3 years of construction work on the tail end of that. So we're at a decision point with this project. I'm going to summarize again the associated projects we've got here. This is MSD's portion, the $8.5 million gallons of capacity we're building there, and we've included some stormwater diversions here that I mentioned. This is the summary, the schematic of the map that is in the approved modified IOAP that EPA blessed here about 2 months ago. So we have a formal blessing from EPA and Division of Water to proceed with this alternate plan. And this is a very large scale. It's difficult for you to follow, but this is the basin site, the 8.5 million gallon basin site. There's a series of stormwater diversions that will be built down along Lexington Road that will help us pick up and divert some of that stormwater from the system. So that's what that looks like today. So what we're going to get into tonight is we have landed pretty firmly back to where we started really in terms of the location of this basin. We've gone through a very extensive alternatives analysis in terms of location and size. We are confident that there absolutely has to be a basin here, and we are moving forward with the design of an 8.5 million gallon CSO basin in this area behind Jim Porter's and between that and Beargrass Creek. So that's one of the announcements we want to be very clear about tonight, is that is where we are proceeding with the location of that basin. So one of the things we want to start getting feedback in now, having arrived at that decision, having to make some decisions moving forward about design, is what would that look like? What can that look like when we're done with it? And it's very important for us to get involvement from the public about what the aesthetics of it would look like, what the property itself would look like. Is there any interest or reason to include public access to the property? So those are some of the issues that Ted is going to help walk us through. So there's really 4 key issues we want to try to get some input on first, and that is, what about access to the site? We are typically, when MSD builds a facility, a treatment plant, a regional pumping station, they're fenced off with 6-foot chain link fences, and they're shut off from the public, and there's no public access. We recognize that there's an opportunity here maybe to do something different, and we would like to get some input from the audience about what those options might look like. So 4 options on the table really is the first one I just described. No public access to the site at all. MSD would retain rights to it, we would build it, we would fence it off, and we would maintain it, and the public stays out of it. So that's the first option that we would like to get feedback on. The second is a somewhat restricted access, in that we would allow public parking adjacent to our control building, and we would allow that parking at that site and construct access to the series of trails that people use along Beargrass Creek. The third option is really an unrestricted option in terms of the public being able to access the entire site. You would be able to park there, you would be able to access the trail from there, and you would be able to have some type of passive recreation in an area on top of this CSO basin. Not knowing what that looks like, we're really talking about some type of a passive recreation, something that is in a grass environment with some vegetation. It could have trails, and other than that, there's not a lot of detail that we can put into it, but we'd like to get feedback about what the public thinks about that. The fourth is an option that involves the same unrestricted access, but with a more structured recreational component. So your mind can run wild about what that looks like: jogging trails, basketball courts, tennis courts, anything that you can imagine that people would want to use for recreation and athletic purposes. So in that realm of possibilities. Okay, Ted, I think, is this your slide?
Yeah, I think so. So, and you're going to go back to the map, right? So we can,
Yep.
Right, okay. All right, so this is sort of the large focus group part of the exercise. So Steve sort of put in front of you 4 programs, if you will, different ways of thinking about what to do on the surface of this basin. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, the same 3 questions about each of these 4 ideas, and whatever you tell us is what we're going to put up here, and then we're going to find out what you think about the ideas that come out of the audience. So the first question I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to ask you collectively, and I think let's just go on to the... So in each case, my first question is going to be, if you think about the concept of no public access as Steve described it, you know, a fence around it, something growing inside, what's your sort of first blush reaction to that? Does this feel, do you see benefits to this? Do you have reservations or questions about this? What do you think might be positives or negatives from your point of view? And anything, there's not any right or wrong answers. We're just curious if you think about the idea of having the basin basically restricted so people can't get onto it. What do you think about that in terms of positives or negatives? Anyone?
I have a question. When you say the basin, is it going to be an open pit where sewage sits out in the open, or will it be underground with a concrete top on it?
Yeah, great question. I should have clarified that. All of the CSO basins we're planning in the combined sewer system are underground, cast-in-place concrete structures covered. So this will be covered with some type of either a pavement or some type of a grass surface.
So that people can walk on it, drive on it, potentially have asphalt work on top of it.
Yeah, probably not drive on it. But,
okay,
yes,
but for the most part, well, actually, the public will not, if they're walking on it, the public will not be contaminated.
No. It's important to recognize also that these basins are used during wet weather, so a majority of the time they sit empty as available storage for overflows in our system.
Right, and that's a good question because that's kind of the point here. We have now this structure and it's going to have a lid on it essentially, and what can we do with that lid, if you will?
But it's going to have vents on it, right?
There will be ventilation built into it, that's correct. So how you incorporate that ventilation into whatever that use is, we would need to carefully consider that.
When will the ventilation be in operation?
These will be naturally aspirated, so there will not be mechanical ventilation involved in these. It's just a way for the basin to breathe, essentially.
So it's that sewage that sits there, dries out, that odor will come up through these ventilation ducts.
Is the sewage a runoff?
Let me repeat the 2 questions that we had for the camera. The first question was, as the sewage dries up, is it going to be an odor issue? The sewage won't dry up. These are short-term detention facilities. We expect those to be held in these things for no more than 48 hours, so that we expect them to be pumped down very, very quickly. They will not dry up. There won't be odor issues or that come during that short detention time. And your question was?
Is this combined storage?
Yes, this is combined sewage, so a combination of sanitary sewage and stormwater.
So will water wash it off as it gets pumped down? It's going to leave a residue. It's going to leave a solid residue.
The question was, is there a residue left in the bottoms of these basins that could contribute to odor? And the answer is no. All these systems have an automated washdown process. So after every event, they're pumped down and will be washed down, and that sediment pumped out of the basin after every event. And we can spend an awful lot of time talking about the technical details of those, and we're happy to do that.
So they have real world impacts on people in the area.
Sure, absolutely.
Right.
They're worthy of discussion.
So are you saying that there's no odor or minimal?
We do not expect any odor from these facilities at all. And again, we are designing for a future installation of odor control if they're needed. But based on what we've seen from other communities who have invested large amounts of money in odor control on the front end and have never used them, we are designing for the implementation of that in the future if we need it.
Steve, what's the acreage footprint of this 8.5 gallon basin?
We don't know what the footprint is because we haven't begun a formal design process yet. But just in terms of what we were looking at before, if it was 200 by 400 feet before, it's something in the magnitude of 50, 60% of that.
And will there be a truck entrance to drive into it and clean it out, or will it be scooped out with a crane, or how is it?
The entrance to the basin will be here off of Lexington Road and will be only access to our control building. We do not need to get equipment down into this basin. It is self-cleaning after every event. So we have the ability to put people down in it if we need to, but we're designing them so we don't expect to put people down in there very often, and never equipment or backhoes or bobcats.
Okay. Back to our question, and I think you, sir, had a comment.
Well, the question was pertaining to the first, no public access.
Right, no public access.
What would be the merits and what would be the
Yeah.
merits? Yeah. So I thought a merit might be that no one would graffiti on it, but now that I know it's underground, it won't be graffiti on it.
So we don't have to worry about graffiti in any case. Okay.
Well,
And-
there is a control building there, so that would be a potential target for vandalism
So
in
graffiti
one of the
would
options.
prevent graffiti on the control building. Okay. Yes, sir.
I do have one question. Is this the first basin where you might have restricted or potential substantial access? Are there other examples within the metro district where you've done this that you have experienced?
So the question is, have we had this debate in other areas in terms of public access above these CSO basins? We're in the process of designing several more of those. There are a total of 9 of these in the combined system today that we're proposing. This is the first one that we've gotten this far along in the process to have the discussion about public access versus restricted access. We do have another one moving to design soon at the corner of Logan and Breckenridge Streets, the Logan Street CSO basin. That is currently planned to be fenced off with restricted access because of the way that facility was designed originally.
And that's part of the reason that we're asking you these questions tonight, so you can kind of help us think through this. So what does it mean to have restricted access? What does it mean to maybe have more general access? How would you use that? How would it help? Because you guys are the ones that have to think through, so what would I do with that, right? And it helps the designers think that through. So that's kind of the purpose of asking. I mean, they seem like kind of detailed questions, but it's really meant to get you to sort of sit back for a moment and imagine that and think about it and how either you or people that you know might be interested in a facility. Maybe it's more like a nature trail, or maybe it's more like a basketball court or tennis court, or maybe from your point of view it's better if it's just nobody gets on that facility. So that's kind of this discussion. That's the point of what we're doing now. So, yes, sir. Right. I mean, typically if you get an idea and there's going to be things you think about as, oh, that would be good, and then there's going to be some, but what about this? So we kind of want both sides of that. It's the what about this and the other things that might be good.
Well, I would just might add, for my comment about graffiti, maybe we should input like less graffiti on the control building.
Right, minimizes graffiti.
So it looks like a benefit, not graffiti.
Oh, yeah.
Which
The
would
benefit is less graffiti. And I saw several hands going up. Yes, ma'am.
I think that a concern to me is that being that it's adjacent to that restored wetlands to the east and to the west, it is also is a metro park that's on this trail that security would not be
So-
this doesn't fit in with the site.
Doesn't fit in with the site. It's incompatible with the, okay. And you had your hand?
Would the present experience of walking along the Beargrass Creek Trail be altered, or are you going to intrude into the present trail pathway and change that experience, or will it be hidden from that present experience?
The question was, would this project impact the existing trail along Beargrass Creek? It might during construction. There may be a period during construction that we need to have a detour of that path. Long term, I would expect the path itself to remain pretty well where it is today, with the exception of connections that we might build to it.
The other side of the creek will be completely deforested for about a 40-foot width to bring in the new feeder
I would need to go back to a different map to talk about. There is some clearing that takes place along the portions of Beargrass Creek in order to get the conveyance lines to this basin. You're correct.
A considerable distance from 166 where it discharges all the way down to where the basin is.
That's right.
Would you all replant that, or what would you do with that?
Not having gotten into those permitting details, I would expect that we would be required to replant most of that area. Again, we'll have more details as we move through design on that issue.
Yes, sir.
As far as it being restricted, it probably would be less cost to maintain the area, which could affect sewage rates.
Okay, so potential for lower maintenance to lower sewage rates. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. What we're going to do is Ben's going to put this back up as a polling slide. And yes, sir, of course.
As far as the public access, it's presently being used by hobos and bums to live in, a considerable population of them in the summer. Can we consider mitigation for the homeless population as a offsetting?
Well, our next question is mitigation and enhancements of this, so yes. So hang on to that.
But that's a public access issue.
Right. So is your point here? Well, we'll go to the next one. Yes, sir.
I definitely, if we're going to have that container officially buried, I'd like to have on top of it a public access. So my benefit would be a public access. But also, I'd like to throw in a caveat, perhaps having for the design to throw it to, like we do with our speed school, for to have competition to find out what to do with that. But the idea is, if we're going to have this large area, then I'd like for public access to have it and let the community help with their input as to what it would be.
Well, that's what we're trying to do this evening, right? So when we get in a couple questions here, when we get to the open access, then we'll get some more specifics from you about that. So let's. We're going to jump to this, and what I want you to do is just as we did a minute ago, where you can enter up to 3 numbers of these comments, the ones that you agree with most strongly. It doesn't have to be 3. It can be 1 or 2, the ones that matter the most to you. And you'll see the slide come up here in a second. Okay, so you get what we're doing? We're taking your comments, and then you all are telling us which of these are the ones that are most important to you. And it can be up to 3. So I'm basically giving you like 3 sticky dots to stick up there. Okay? Only we're doing it electronically and anonymously. And if there aren't 3 that you like, then you don't have to like 3. You can like 1, or you can like none of them. Okay, is everybody happy? Let's see what you said. Okay, so the biggest single concern is the impact on minimizing the impact on the existing trails. And that's partly a construction issue and partly design. Okay, so our next question then is related partly to that, and it gets us back to this gentleman's comment. Under these circumstances of restricted access, what kinds of things would make this a better facility? What would enhance that? If this came to be the design, what would help make it as good as possible? And that's a tough one for this because maybe it's about the fence, maybe it's about the plantings.
What's the infrastructure top?
Like
In other words, you don't want to create an impervious structure that just avenues,
right.
Run off issues. So it should be either a solid roof or
So,
some kind of managed infrastructure top.
okay.
And my second comment is that since the president uses by the impoverished homeless community, that maybe U of L's competition could design some services for the homeless population. They flank all the banks in Beargrass Creek and they need showers and health services, and maybe we could have a facility like that.
We can put it up there. I can't guarantee you that that's within MSD's purview to build or operate. I doubt that it is. But we're willing to gauge to see, you know, how interested people are in that as a concept. Maybe someone else can pick it up. And what else? Anything else we can do to make this a better, more appealing, more useful? If not, that's fine. We'll go to the next concept.
Displaced wildlife survey to see whether you're getting rid of any of the great animals. Wildlife displacement.
Wildlife displacement, okay.
Well, along those lines, inside the yellow dashed perimeter there, I don't know how many trees are currently there, but if they're taken out, you know, as a mitigating enhancement, plant that many trees, or maybe 1.5 as many trees, somewhere meaningfully in the community.
So do the maximum possible reforestation. I don't know how much of that's possible again, but that has to do with
Not necessarily right there per se, but as
Offsite
a mitigating
mitigation.
factor, perhaps somewhere like planting them in the community on rights-of-way trees or something like that.
okay. So offsite mitigation.
Correct.
Okay.
Preferably in the same area.
Right. Offsite, but not too far offsite. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to do it right on top of the structure.
Anything else there? Yes, sir.
Consider a multi-story structure rather than a flat structure. Could you go up with it? And could you generate power either in the taking of the storm sewer flows or in the overflow or whatever? Does it have a potential to generate power?
So try to capture some hydropower potential? Okay. Anything else? Should we score this one? Yes, sir.
I think that's a good point, but possibly even solar panels in there to run the pumps.
So look for some alternative energy power sources? Okay.
So money that ultimately gets turned into higher sewer costs.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Okay. The up to 3 that you agree with most strongly. And if you don't agree with 3 of them strongly, that's fine. And if you don't agree with any of them, that's fine too. I believe the comment was to do a survey, do an assessment of wildlife displacement. Is that everyone? Okay. So it's important to have the green infrastructure top. Other popular ideas of the wildlife survey and exploring the use of alternative energy to run the pumps. So the third question we have for you is, now that we've talked about this a little bit and we've thought about, you know, kind of what the downside might be and what the advantages might be and what we could do, generally, what's your impression of this as a suitable way to treat this in your neighborhood? How suitable is this as the way to use this facility in your neighborhood, to basically put a fence around it on a scale where 1 is really not good and 9 is really wonderful, and anything in between? Your assessment. And we're going to ask, by the way, we're going to ask the same question for the other 3, so I'm not forcing you to choose. If you may hate all of them, and that's fine, or you may love all of them, and that's fine too.
So how suitable is restricted public access?
Yeah, how suitable. We've talked about this a little bit, things we could do. How suitable under those circumstances? Is this a good idea? How good of an idea is this?
This is without the implementation of our suggested mitigations. This is just no public access.
Right, because we don't know which of those mitigations we might use. We can't, you know, we couldn't necessarily do all those simultaneously, so it would be like a moving target for everybody. Okay, Let's see what we have. So, some people kind of like it, and some people kind of don't like it. So, not surprised. All right, so the next concept, do you want to talk through it a little bit, Steve?
Yeah. So next concept, you'll see that the fence has been modified to go over only around the basin itself, the concrete structure itself, which is buried. We have the same entrance off of Lexington Road. We have a proposed parking area that will be used for both MSD operations as well as available to the public. And we will be constructing trail access as used for a trailhead down as a connector to the existing trail along Beargrass Creek. That trailhead and that connection could look a lot of different ways, but just conceptually, we're trying to get some feedback on what that concept is like to you all.
Okay, thanks. So it's the same drill. Yes, ma'am.
Well, currently, Jim Porter's is nice enough not to, I mean, they probably don't have a choice, but a lot of people that like there with their kids will park there because, you know, they want to just ride the trail and not ride all the way from Big Rock or something. So this would relieve Jim Porter's from having to provide it. There isn't any, there was some proposed down at the Metro Park, the Greenway Still, which is right there next to the Girl Scouts, but it was never, there's a master plan for that, but it has not been funded. So right now, there is no parking to get on the trail, not there nor at the exit at Locust Street. There's no parking down there because it's residential.
So this would be a positive, yes. Additional parking would be a positive. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir?
There is presently no access to the DOT property on the other side of I-64, the so-called Clifton area, which is also suitable for public park use and is used by the homes. Would MSD consider creating either a pedestrian bridge over I-64 or a tunnel access under 64 along with this major construction of under 64 interceptors and so forth to join up and enhance the trail experience?
I wouldn't speak for whether they would or wouldn't. I would say that you've just suggested an enhancement that goes with the next question.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, hang on to that. Yeah. You're ahead of us. Yeah. So it's good. Anything else in terms of reactions, positive benefits, concerns about this kind of approach to using this basin top?
Will this trailhead and parking lot do any further green infrastructure for the KT's, Jim Porter's giant impervious area?
So would it help?
The stormwater situation from the impervious in that very large identified impervious area around KT's and Jim Porter's. That had no green infrastructure right now. Well, it does have on the wetlands, the constructed wetlands has a little discharge, but will that be piped with a separate storm sewer, or how would we handle runoff from that?
We wouldn't be doing anything across Lexington Road on KT's site, but we could incorporate impervious or green infrastructure in this parking lot. I think that would be more of an enhancement as well. For the next slide.
Yes, sir?
Are we able to put more benefits up?
Sure.
This isn't necessarily a benefit, but more of a design. Toss out like a Big Rock, those really neat impervious pavers with the grass in them. If that were the substrate for the parking, that would be nice, I think. I don't know if that belongs on the board or not.
Should we, you want to just jump ahead to the next question since I'm getting suggestions about design enhancements? Are you guys happy with this? So we'll just close this slide out. We'll open up the next one, and we'll take your suggestions about ways to enhance this. This is Ben Blandford, by the way, He drew the short straw tonight, so he gets to sit back there and fat finger while all I have to do is manipulate a microphone. So next time, probably I lose, and he'll be up here, and I'll be back there frantically typing. Okay, so your comment again about is he getting it right?
Yeah, yes, it's, basically there's a big green area on the other side of 64 that could be attached to the Irish Hill, Fairgrounds Creek Trail.
Okay.
And, but it needs a pedestrian connection to do that.
Okay. Anything else you can think of here that would make this a better facility?
Perhaps some kind of like interpretive signs that they're using like out in the Floyd's Fork areas where they say cultural just signage.
Okay. For what in particular?
Perhaps the area. You know,
So like neighborhood?
Some that we already have on the trailhead.
Okay.
It's educational as far as nature.
So bring them up to the trail, bring them up to have additional ones. Yeah, yeah, I didn't mean move them, but yeah. Okay. What else?
And then they can also have a street safe sign, so that people know that it's parked.
Oh, guidance for parking out front. To tell people that, right, so people would know that. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I have a question that's a little off, but the site entrance, where is it proposed? I mean, where will it actually be in relation to the quarters and the buildings next to it?
Yeah, I think this is the house that they refer to as the White House. I don't know if that's a common name for it or not, but it runs just to this side of the White House.
What's on the other side?
That is a business, right?
What is this business? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Hammer.
Right now, there's a parking lot, you know, like a gravel parking lot that our agency uses at times.
So is there any suggestion about how to improve that?
I'm really concerned about that being the entrance, but, you know.
I think Steve told me earlier that in wet weather, when this basin reaches its capacity, it shuts off and refuses to take any more flow and goes back and diverts it at the original CSO 127 overflow. Is that behind the August moon?
It doesn't physically shut off. It doesn't need to. The system is simply allowed to relieve itself as it does today. So these CSOs that are in place today, we are not eliminating their potential to discharge. We're just minimizing the frequency that they discharge.
So you have this long effluent channel coming from behind August moon.
That's correct.
Why can't you do something about that? That seems outrageous. That thing is about a half-mile long, or maybe, quarter-mile long, and it reeks when the old sewage overflow settles in it. The water's discolored, full of white sanitary waste, and the whole area for a period of time smells from that lingering there. I would think that this major construction project would redesign that CSO so that it no longer has a long effluent channel that destroys the ambience of the trail area. That's my comment. I guess the enhancement suggestion is eliminate effluent channel.
Okay.
I never knew where the smell was coming from or if it's related, but sort of just as you're going up the hill on Lexington, I've always noticed under that underpass at 64, it smells like dead fish almost every time I drive under there. I don't know if that's related to anything MSD facilities or if that's just there's some trout that can't get upstream there or what, but if that's related to this channel that he was just talking about, then perhaps odor is that's something we should look into eliminating.
Okay.
I can speak to that a little bit. The Friends of Beargrass Creek met with MSD at one point, and they did some site testing of that discharge near the bicycle bridge there, pedestrian bridge, and that whitish discoloration, MSD told us, was caused by contaminated groundwater that was flowing out from under I-64 and was highly fluoride and salty, which they said was from DIC or some other source, but we call it the mystery discharge, and it's certainly polluted. And I think MSD with colleagues will, in the course of this CSO work, probably be excavating that, won't you?
Possibly. The question was about odor. If you encounter an odor complaint, you can call our customer relation folks 24/7 and report it, and we'll be happy to respond to it. We can check for odors ourselves, and we're interested in trying to deal with them as effectively as we can. We are dealing with something that by its very nature has an odor to it, so it's difficult to control all the time.
Maybe if there's more about that discussion needs to happen, it needs to happen later so we don't get people kind of off track here. So is there anything else here? Do you want to go ahead and put your sticky dots on this one, and we'll move to the next question? I've been loaded up. So the next two, as we get to the next two options, obviously it'll be about having some sort of passive recreation and or structured recreation. So I'll be thinking about that. Okay, so these are the items that were suggested as mitigations, the ones that you agree with most strongly, up to 3. Is everyone in? Okay. So green infrastructure for the parking lot and the smell from the effluent channel. Overall, as a concept, is it lousy? Is it great? Is it somewhere in between?
Is that with our mitigations and enhancements or without?
No, it's without. So, a fourth of you really don't like it, and a fourth of you kind of like it. So, all right, so let's go to the next one, which is a passive recreation option. And would you prefer that we just go to the mitigation enhancement question? Would that speed this up for everybody? Okay.
So what we're talking about here, just real quickly, is that this is highlighted just to show the footprint of what the top of that basin could look like. Not necessarily that size, but the same parking issue would be available, same trail access, and this would be dedicated to some type of an open green space with some type of passive recreation ability.
So the question here is basically, if you imagine other sort of trails and green space that you've enjoyed, what was it that made it enjoyable that we could do here? What would it, what's the potential here of things that could be done? Yes, ma'am.
I think there is an education opportunity here.
In terms of?
MSD.
Oh, okay. So education about the MSD system. The education about the system and the facility.
And well, not just whatever we do, but no, I mean about it's an impact on the environment.
Okay.
Not that
Yes, sir.
I would suggest that, if nothing else, a community garden in box garden.
Okay. Set up organize a community garden or make it available for someone to use it as someone else to manage a community garden, either way. Other ideas? Yes, sir.
Like sports for like soccer field, tennis court.
Right. Right. That's going to be, that's sort of our next option is to have some kind of sports idea. So hang on to that. Yes, ma'am.
It's sports, but it's an asset. We had, on our school board, we had one of the local women raised children, and we were advocating some empty properties in our neighborhood that maybe that they have, like lockers, so that there's sort of like safety deposit boxes, so you can put your change of clothes, or it would be like a parking car, park and bike, or that you just have a place to put your valuables.
So a lockable.
Yeah, evidently there's some other best management, who somebody else is doing this. So
Yeah, okay.
it wasn't just that something we thought of, but it's something that they've done in other communities.
So lockable lockers. That's
I should have
interesting.
mentioned on the front end of these last two options as well, is that if we pursue either of these last two options, it's likely to require some type of a partnership between either metro government and or parks, so they would be players in both of those options.
Some other ideas? Yes, sir.
Maybe we could just say just bicycle facilities where Metro would become involved. You know, they've got some pretty strong staff that are working on that could perhaps.
So a bicycle facility, bicycle infrastructure. Right. Well, it could be the more elaborate bicycle infrastructure. Sure. What else?
Rather than take it, rather than have the cost in our sewer bill, or transfer that to the city taxes for them to maintain, what about private industry, operating a facility for soccer fields, or, private industry involvement, I guess you'd call it.
Maybe public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay, so generally some kind of private industry engagement. Okay.
It just seems like, we're expanding our parks and trails and all this stuff, and it's great, don't get me wrong. But like along the riverfront, our neighbors in Jeffersonville are making a lot of money on their riverfront, and we're paying taxes on ours.
Okay.
And, this is just some more of that type of land where, why not get revenue instead of paying sewer bills and taxes?
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Break out your sticky dots. We have one more round of these, and then I think we're near the end. Thank you for your patience here. We wanted to make sure that we sort of went through these in some detail, and you've been very kind.
Yes, sir. Are people allowed to kayak or canoe in that Fairgrass Creek there? Is that going on?
Question was, are you allowed to kayak or canoe in Beargrass? And absolutely, you're allowed to if you choose to.
So I would maybe suggest, well, that's going to be, I'm sorry, on the next, more of a structured use.
We'll put it on the next one. People can still react to it. Okay. The polling is open. You may not be able to see the little window up there, but we're listening. Okay, is everybody in? All right, we'll see what we have. So community garden is a popular idea, and the other ones are about the same. The bicycle idea is an improvement on the bicycle lockers. So there you go. Okay, so the next question is, generally, is this a good idea, a bad idea, sort of an idea? Is that everyone? Okay. So the number is coming up. We're up around 6.2 now. So let's go to the last option. Steve?
So last one, same scenario, open to the public, completely same parking area, same connection to the trailhead. This time we have some type of a more structured use to that area above the basins in terms of, use your imagination, tennis courts, volleyball courts, basketball courts, things of that nature.
Okay, so again, we'll go to the enhancement question, the mitigation. Describe this for me in more detail. What would you like to see on it? Yes, sir.
Go ahead and throw in maybe some kind of a kayak put in or something like that.
Place to put in kayaks, put in canoes. What else? Picnic facilities, okay. What else?
Again, a privatized, like a Mockingbird Valley type thing.
Tell me what that is.
It's a privatized facility for soccer
Oh, okay.
and tennis.
So privatized soccer, tennis facility, okay. What else? Yes, ma'am. A playground? Okay.
I think like a playground is great, so is too the basketball or fitness, but that's just people sort of running back and forth. Some type of like a trail, guided, educational. So you're learning as a structured recreation as opposed
So
to
more of
just
a formal trail with education, with educational panels and that sort of thing? Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir. A public pool? Okay.
What would be, these are we going to do enhancements, not mitigations? What would be an example of mitigation?
I don't know.
I think the mitigation that we talked about in terms of either reforestation or just as an example are things that we would probably consider under any of these options. So
Okay, everything's backwards and so.
that would be my thought.
How about a headquarters building for lodging?
So a city office building or a MSD?
Computer access point where we could get Logic Max, use the GIS to investigate the area, the open public.
So a community, so Logic would have a community interface? Okay. Does Kurt know about this?
Not yet.
A community.
Kiosk, like an interactive screen on the kiosk?
Yeah, like just like you now go downtown to MSD's office and walking back and get some help with a Logic request, but they could have what would be better to sit on top of a sewer overflow building than a giant Logic access point.
So you're thinking of a kiosk then, or some sort of
Yeah, I mean, I would be a manned LOJIC.
So more like a service center.
Access point for the community. It is supposedly a community facility, access to the Logic GIS facilities. And it needs better, you have a parking lot there, you walk in, nice glass and chrome building, you go in, you have a counter, you have stations where you can access Logic tools, just like you're a big developer.
Okay. Does that work? Community Logic access? Does that capture it? Do you have your hand up?
Along those lines, it's an interesting idea. Like Joe Creason Park has a Louisville Nature Center, so they don't probably just do one thing. So, like a facility that offers a suite of public access, maybe PVA, block, we can get onto that field, but
So you're thinking more about public service information things or public education?
I want to stick towards the public service.
Okay, so
education.
a broader sort of public service interface.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of.
Okay.
We're very musical natural community, why not a music facility?
Like an amphitheater?
Could be a band shell, could be an enclosed music and arts center.
So, some kind of music center. Okay, so there's one. And I think his other comment was it's a public service.
That was like the analogy I was using.
Public service access. Is that right? Is that what we said?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Is that enough? Enough enhancements? Oh, we have one more. And then we're out of room.
We talked about reforestation as mitigation before, because we are taking up there'll be less variable area, even though that's maybe better off, so maybe that's not true. But it would be nice if some of that mitigation would be to do some projects on this large expanse of concrete between Beverly, Lexington, and Grinstead Drive. So if they could do some parking lot enhancements to some of these, that could be considered an offsite mitigation in the area. So if they put in aprons for them, or pervious areas, biocells, swales, something like that. Because if you look at the area of that, you see that's all gray there.
Okay, so runoff mitigation for existing parking.
Correct.
Okay.
Removal of pervious surface.
Okay. All right, so we have 10, so we're going to give you your dots. Okay, I see 9 people. Is everybody in who wants to be? Used all your sticky dots? Okay. Let's see. So picnic facilities and the playground are the ones that appeal to most people. Now again, the ones that appeal to most people here, it's not like we have a giant sample, so we're trying to get a sense of ideas and things that are appealing to a lot of people. And our intent is to continue to ask more questions about this, but we appreciate your help in that. I think...
Get one more?
So I think last question is, how suitable is this for your neighborhood? Okay, so this is a little more popular than the rest of them. I think we have a couple wrap-up questions, a couple wrap-up things from
So
Steve.
first of all, thank you all very much for your patience. We are trying to make these meetings more efficient and provide an adequate amount of information and get as much feedback as we can. We were actually shooting to have this meeting last an hour tonight, so we're going on an hour and 40 minutes now, so thank you for your patience. This is a new process for us, and there'll be some glitches along the way. Just to wrap up, we'll talk a little bit about schedule. Yes, sir, you have a question?
Yeah, can you go back to the slide that shows the quarry, the overview of the expressway? So you have the quarry, CSO thing. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Here's a suggestion. You see where it says 40th Street? I noticed that you've got CSO 126 at part of your program. Well, CSO 126, 125, and 144 are on the north side of I-64. And as you know, in the Hood neighborhood, we've got the slopes, the hills. And what we have is, because of I-64, we've got an elongated bowl going on. So what I want to suggest is, instead of having 126 come onto this side of the expressway, how about if you guys would have lines through as CSO 144, 125, 126, which is 442-acre watershed, and have an elongated basin, and then on top of the elongated basin, you have a walking bicycle path. And what you could do is you have the entrance at Grinstead, and they come along parallel to on the north side of I-64, where the cliffs are, of course, and then you would exit on Stoll, which is a public right-of-way, a public street, and then Stoll would take you up to Kane Street, where the Louisville paving's at. So then we could have a walking bike path on both sides of 64, it could connect to the Butchertown walking bike path. But more importantly is that since CSO 144 and 125 were not addressed with this basin, then how about if you have a basin on our side, the Clifton side of I-64? And then because it would be an elongated bowl, basin, but the more important thing that would be way cool is if you could have a walking path, bicycle path.
Just real quickly, I just would like to respond to it if I can. I'll be very brief. If you noticed in our presentation, we are not bringing conveyance from 126 under I-64. We were actually able to modify that existing structure with a modified weir and deal with the overflows from 126. So there's not a conveyance coming under 64 from 126. 125 is part of this project, and there is an existing conveyance under the interstate we hope to be able to utilize to accomplish that. So we are not having to build a conveyance under I-64, so that's important to recognize. Obviously, great ideas in terms of improvements and enhancements, but also very costly. So all of the solutions we tried to develop are really keeping the ratepayers' dollars in mind and trying to keep this very large consent decree as manageable as we can. So I will go back and try to wrap up here. Just in terms of schedule, we are moving into a final design process. We expect to wrap up sometime in the fall of 15. We will have at least one more meeting out to the public to get additional input when we're at about 30% design and share some of the ideas that we come up with, and hopefully some of the ones we talked about tonight. Additionally, we are required and will go through a community facilities review that allows the public to further comment as we get closer to the finalization of design. Spring of 2017 is really our deadline to get this thing to construction. We would like 2 full seasons of construction in order to complete this, and if we could get 3, we might need it. So we're trying to keep, we're doing very well in terms of schedule with our consent decree right now. We're about 9 years into a 19-year program and slightly ahead of schedule right now, so we want to leave ourselves a little cushion for unforeseen delays, as we always have on these large capital projects. So the process will begin to move fairly quickly, and we'll hope to see you back at our next public meeting.